Okay.
There is another dimension to the Sri Lankan question. That is, Sri Lanka was actually depending on not only on tourism earnings. One of its, as I already mentioned, one of its main earnings was from tourism. Along with that, Sri Lankan expatriates. Many Sri Lankan expatriates were regularly sending funds to Sri Lanka, deposits, which were also a source of income for the regime or for the economy. That source also became reduced because of these national and international developments. And because of the, as we have already said, because of COVID, because of the this pandemic, I mean, because of these internal problems, because of the Ukraine crisis, and all these because of these prices of petroleum going up, as I have already said, export foreign exchange crisis became too serious, and foreign debt, international debt of Sri Lanka economy skyrocketed. There it became very high. It cannot be repaid in such a way that normal methods of repayment of this debt became impossible for the Sri Lankan regime. Here we have to examine the details, some details connected with the Sri Lanka's debt position. So Sri Lanka is actually getting loans from various sources, from European imperialist sources, IMF and World Bank, as usual, Asian Development Bank. These are actually institutions controlled by Western imperialist powers. Apart from that, Western imperialist capitalists, I mean, MNCs have also their role in Sri Lanka. That is one aspect. That is Sri Lanka's indebtedness to these countries, these sources, and this is part of a neo-colonial transformation, because we know after the Second World War, U.S. imperialism emerged with these institutions to have its neo-colonial control. So multinational companies, Bretton Woods system, then WTO, and all these have their respective role in creating the crisis in Sri Lanka. But a new development of importance is the Chinese role. We know that after the crisis of 2008, world crisis, China, which has already become a transformed, which adopted the capitalist path after Mao's death. From that position, from a capitalist country, China slowly transformed into an imperialist power, not only an ordinary level, but catching up with the US imperialism. And in many respects, China even surpassed US imperialism, probably except in military. In terms of actual investment, except in military, in almost all modern technologies, China has an advantage over US imperialism today. But apart from that, quite reminiscent of the Marshall Plan of the early post-war years, when US imperialism started its neo-colonial offensive through the Marshall Plan. That means reconstructing the post-war Europe. In the same way, China has evolved a Belt and Road program, BRI, Belt and Road program of China, which is almost several times bigger than, even according to the current dollar exchange rate, according to that, several times higher than the Marshall Plan, larger than the Marshall Plan. That is $1 trillion. 1 trillion is 1,000 billion, you know. So $1,000 billion capital export program, the biggest in history. So China is now through this BRI program is expanding not only throughout Asia, but is expanding to Africa, even even crossing Europe. It is now has reached Latin America also. Now Africa, China has become the biggest capital investor, the biggest capital exporter to Africa, China, and it is now in the process of replacing US imperialism in Latin America also. So in that process, Sri Lanka became that means in this Belt and Road program, Sri Lanka is a destination of this VRI program. And a difference between the Western capital investment and Chinese investment. For example, when you examine the Western notions or Western methods of capital investment, that we know for the last 200 years, the Anglo-Saxon model, we know how the West has developed its model of capital export, investment, etc. But China has evolved a different method. Chinese investment and Chinese capital export is not on the same pattern as that of the Western powers. China closely associated with the Rajapaksa regime, and many Chinese companies, these Chinese companies are closely integrated with the bureaucratic capitalist state power of China. That is the state power, the Chinese regime, which is what is called an embodiment of bureaucratic capitalism. It is most powerful state, and the integration of the state with capital is to be studied in a detailed way. How surplus value is extracted in China and abroad by Chinese capital is a thing that has to be studied in a detailed manner. So China's investment in Sri Lanka, not only in Sri Lanka, in any other country, in Iran, if you examine, or in Djibouti in Africa, you examine, or in Sudan, you examine, it is different from the way in which Western powers are exporting capital. So in Sri Lanka, wherever China, according to estimates, economists or many researchers have pointed out that only 10% of total foreign investment is coming from China. But the power of that 10% total investment, its capacity, its capability to influence Chinese Sri Lankan policies, and its capacity to influence Sri Lankan domestic regime and domestic situation is more powerful, is more capable when compared with other investment. Because whatever investment this China is making, this investment is directly going into the heart of the very Sri Lankan economy. That means only for building up the most strategic infrastructure sectors, in port development, in road development, and in other developments which are associated with Chinese interests. That means Chinese expansion, Chinese interest of establishing its global hegemony, its neo-colonial hegemony on the world. So it is in that way this Chinese capital export is designed. So as and one condition, unlike other countries, investment, China's capital investment has many ties. It's tied. Tied in the sense that the conditionalities are not obvious. Many opacity, many secret understanding with the regimes are there. As a result, now it is reported that because of the debt repayment problem, that is, as Sri Lanka has become an indebted to many sources. It cannot repay its debt to Western powers, IMF, World Bank, or to Western countries. In the same way, it cannot repay its loans to China also. But what has happened is that whatever investment is China has there, all those areas, all those investment destinations are now directly under Chinese control. For example, the ports. It is reported that the Hambantota port is 99 years now it will go under the control of China. This is the way in which China is controlled. So Chinese, no such understanding or no such agreement is with other powers. So China's agreement with Sri Lanka is such that China is directly going to hold many strategic centers of the Sri Lankan economy as a result of this crisis. This is a difference that we have to examine, and whatever investment is there, it will have its political ramifications, which is several fold powerful than that of the Western powers. This is to be understood in a detailed way. I am not going into those details. But coming to the present question, now it has become clear that if the people now cutting across all divisions, all these their this ideological political difference or religious difference, whatever identity politics that imperialism, international sources have created. Cutting across all that, now people are united. The people of Sri Lanka have united against their common enemy. That is the Rajapaksa regime. And now it is being thrown away. Now the military, the police, nothing, nowhere is capable to prevent the rising tide of people's upsurge, people's simmering discontent. Nobody can resist it. Nobody can challenge it. Now the people has come forward. They have overthrown the regime. The whole ruling family is now thrown away, and now they are now seeking refugees, asylum. They are now become refugees in foreign countries. Rajapaksa is now moving from one country to another. It is reported. We don't know the details. And sometimes we don't know which regimes will come for his help, for the service he had done to international capital. We don't know. So this is the most corrupt because of this crony capital, because of the loss of motion of capital today. Chinese, this Sri Lankan regime is become the most corrupt, the most anti-people, the most fascistic. So it is in that way that this is based on the loss of capitalism, loss of finance capital in the neo-colonial period, in the neoliberal period. So it is the outcome of a neo-fascist regime that when people, without in the ultimate sense, if there is no other option, then people will come forward. This is very clear. But the problem here again comes that there is the force, a force capable of, a political force, a political alternative capable of leading these people's struggles to a political alternative.
Social change.
Political change. That means it not a political alternative capable of overcoming this problem. A political alternative means a development perspective, a paradigm. Which is the alternative? Such a leadership having that perspective, capable of challenging international capital and its domestic agents, putting people's interests at the center. Such a force is not to come forward in a clear-cut form. That is a problem. Many forces are. Many revolutionary forces are involved in it, because we also know that many revolutionary forces are involved in this struggle. Many people's forces are there. And the people have united, cutting across all their divisions, all the superimposed divisions, people have united. But leading them to struggle and establishing people's political power, and transforming power to the people, that a political alternative, a political leadership, a revolutionary leadership capable of taking that and challenging imperialism, challenging international capital and its local agents, its local cronies. That force is set to come forward. In the absence of that, as we have seen in Arab Spring, in other revolutions, other people's upsurges, in the absence of a political leadership, a revolutionary leadership, whatever people's initiative upsurge is there, the ruling classes will manage to resolve it, and they again will. At one ruling class, one section may go out, another section may come. So that we have to understand. So the alternative before us, the people, is that the immediate task is that we have to develop people, whether in Sri Lanka or in our country, we have to develop a political alternative. A revolutionary political leadership should come into the leadership of these struggles, and to establish a people's state, a democratic state, capable of establishing a regime which will look after the people's interest against the interest of the enemies. Sri Lanka has enough resources for development. It has enough land, only 22 million people, Sri Lanka. It has enough land, it has enough resources, it has enough geographically, climatically. Sri Lanka is very suitable for habitat, people's habitat, in the very the inhabitation, very advantage, many, so many advantages are there. So to take use of all these things, what is required is a political leadership, and we hope that the people of Sri Lanka will, from their experience, will become mature enough to move in that direction. This is what I have to say on this question.
Okay.